Oh man, this gets really difficult when there's so many enemies. Hey guys, and welcome to the show. So today we're going to be adding health bars and the ability to shoot down planes. Now you can see I'm quite gravely outnumbered. I think there's about 4 or 5 of them, and there's just one of me. So it is quite difficult to get around them. But maybe that's something we can work on at a later stage. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We have a health when we get shot, it goes down, and eventually we can crash and then respawn just like this, and the game goes on. And we can also do the same to the enemies. Right, so we're following off from part 4. The only thing I've actually done is added some cool sounds of when the bullet smashes through the canvas of our planes. We've got some ricochets like that. They're quite neat actually. I don't know where I found these throughout the travels, I suppose, over the years. They're quite soft right now, but that's okay. And then, you know, the gunshot, which we already had, which we need to put on. That's much better. Also noticed that with the sprites, this was set weirdly with some of these. Let's just put them all at 30 while we're here. Otherwise the propeller doesn't spin on some of them at times. Okay, cool. So we already have the shooting. Shooting already works, but what we don't have is a way for the bullet to know who its owner is, because obviously if the bullet's coming up here, which is near the origin of the plane, and we're going to be telling that bullet to detect a collision with the plane-like instance, we obviously don't want it reducing the health of the plane that's actually shooting it. So every time a player plane shoots, we just need to make sure that the bullet's aware that when it does this collision, it just ignores it if it's colliding with the same object as the one that shot it. So straight off, let's go into the player. You'll see this doesn't have its own create event, it's inheriting. So let's go and create its own create event, and we must make sure to set it to inherit from the parent, otherwise it's gonna go strange. And here the type we're gonna set to player. Straightforward little string to identify that this is the player and this is the enemy. I suppose if we want, we could also work with instance IDs, but for now let's just use this system. Enemy. Now these two variables are unique to the different objects, that's why I'm not putting them in the parent, but in the parent we can add the alive property as well as the hit points of 100. Now the plane also has a step event that tells it, in this case, to point towards the target being, in the enemy's case, the player, and in the player's case, the mouse. Now obviously we don't want it to keep chasing the certain position if it's destroyed, so let's wrap this in if alive, then do what you did before, otherwise do something else. Let's just make this look a little nicer. There we go. So what do we do if we're not alive? Well, let's every step let's do image x scale minus equals 0.005. So that's just going to shrink it a little as if it's plummeting to the ground. Image y scale, we can just keep consistent with the x scale so that it reduces in size correctly, it doesn't warp. Then let's also increase the image angle. I'm going to introduce a variable here called death direction, because let's randomize it a bit. Sometimes it's left, sometimes it's right, but we want to make sure that that's consistent at start, and it'll just continue to rotate in that position. And then here I'm going to say, so that's going to keep happening, you know, it's going to shrink smaller and smaller and smaller, and I'm going to use an if check to detect if it's shrunk enough. So if it's less than or equal to 0.1, we can just say at that point that it's hit the ground, and we can reset the plane. And I'm using an unspecific kind of script here. I'm not saying which plane to reset because we want it to be quite generic. That can be used by either craft because this is in the parent after all. So we must just remember at this point that we need to include a variable called death direction whenever we do the collision check with the bullet. You know, we're going to be reducing health, but it's going to come to a point where there's no more health. Maybe it's on like 5 hit points and the bullet does 5 damage. It's less than or equal to 0. That means we need to initiate the death process or the crashing process, which is going to give this a positive or a negative value, which is going to enable it to spin in one of the directions. Each death might actually be unique because we're gonna randomize that. It won't always spin to the left or always spin to the right. So let's go ahead and create SCR reset plane. Now this is going to be different in the sense that these scripts are more of functions. You know, they took in arguments and they returned some sort of something. This one took in arguments and then created something. But in this case, what I want to do is I actually just want to extend properties of this parent object. So you can pretend that these properties or the things I'm doing inside this reset plane actually existed in here. It's one of the other ways to use scripts. So we want to randomize. We want to set the X and Y. We want to set the hit points back to 100. The image X scale and Y scale. Needs to be reset. We need to set it back to being alive. And okay, let's do these. Somewhere around here, I think it was in the controller, we actually created a random point. Here we go. So let's grab these two, we can use them again. And let's plonk that down there for reference. I actually just want this in bit, which aligns with the randomize because we're using the random functions here. So that'll plonk this plane back somewhere on the map. It'll have full health, the scale will be correct, and it will be back to being alive. Now when I was putting this video together, there was something weird that I saw. Well, with this effect we're doing of the plane shrinking in size, it doesn't really look too good if another plane kind of collides with our plane, because you'll see that the object is shrinking according to this code. The object is shrinking, but it's on the same layer as all the other planes. So depending on when they were created, you'll find that because our player gets created first, sometimes it'll always be at the top of this layer that it's in, which looks a little strange if it's small, which is supposed to resemble it being further away, but it's on the same layer as all the enemies, you know. So that overlap is just completely wrong. So in our room, I think what we need to do is go ahead and create another layer here next to the instances layer. We should call this I'm going to call it the death layer. So if you're in the death layer, you're right under the instances, above the background obviously, but it means that while we're shrinking, we'll definitely be under any objects or any other planes that exist in the room. So we'll have that appearance that it's further away. We'll make sure that it's not confusing to any of the players if that situation comes about. Okay, so we need to go back to reset plane, and because we're going to be alternating between two layers, I want to make sure that we reset the layer of the plane when it gets reset back to the instances layer. Now this is actually a function I've never used, believe it or not. But yeah, it basically gets a layer by ID, which is by its name, and then assigns the object or the instances of an object that have this layer property that ID. Very straightforward stuff actually. It was quite simple to sort out. So now that we've reset the plane, we have to start getting into how we get there. Like, why are we resetting the plane? Are we resetting the plane because it got shot down? Okay, cool. So how does the player know when he's about to get shot down? Well, if we go to the plane event, we can add a draw over there. And what we're going to be saying is if we're alive, then we're just going to be using the built-in draw health bar function. I'm going to say X minus 50. I've kind of figured this out beforehand. It's going to be placing it just below the plane, I believe. Y plus 50, Y plus 45, and this needs to be X plus 50. If you want to know more about this draw health bar, I've got a video for that dedicated to it. Check that out, it's quite interesting. Goes in a lot more detail than what we're doing here. And I wanted to go from C black, which is all dead, to C red, which is danger, Will Robertson, to C green, which is hey, you got a lot of health going on there. And it's show black, which is going to be the black bar at the back, and it's going to have a black border around it because that kind of gives it some definition. Although we are on a black background, but anyway, for now at least, let's keep that in. And that's all we need to do actually to draw that health bar. Very straightforward stuff. So let's think. Before we go about and do a collision check between the planes and the bullet, let's define when the player and the enemy can actually shoot. For this, we actually need to say draw self. Otherwise, it's going to make us invisible. All right. So now that that's done, let's think to ourselves: what defines being alive? Well, I mean, in this case, it means you've got health, right? And when you're alive, you can shoot. You can't shoot when you're dead. It's going to look a little strange if the plane's falling. It's disabled at that point, and the player can still shoot. That seems strange. So let's go to our player, because it's the shooting mechanism here is more controlled. And we're saying, well, if you can shoot, then go ahead and shoot. But I'm also going to say here, well, you have to also be alive. To be alive, to shoot also. And let's do a similar thing for the enemy. I think that's alarm 0, where here it says if you're in range, then you create a bullet. I'm going to say you have to be in range and you have to be alive. Cool. So while we're here, we're creating the bullet. Remember, in our player and in the enemy objects, we set a type. It's very important for us to send this type through when we're using this SCR create bullet. So let's say type over there. And this is the enemy. Where's the player? Global left down. Send the type through to that script. Now this is going to complain saying, hey, too many arguments applied. So let's head to the create bullet. Remember we had owner here. I think this was from the second tutorial, and I said we'd be revisiting that later. Well, now is later. Argument 5 is going to be the owner, and we're just going to be transferring that through the script into the object itself, just like that. Right, so at this point in time, this instance that exists on the bullets layer is now going to have an owner. Now it's saying, well, that's great, but you haven't used it yet. Another thing we need to do before we leave is put that like that, so it appears quite nicely when we use it, which we already have, but that's for future, and just in case we want to use this again. So we've pretty much done all the other things we need to do. Let's go about and handle the collision with the object bullet. I'm going to be placing this inside the parent, because the player and the enemy obviously inherits from this, and the consequence of colliding with a bullet is common to both of them. So object plane, we're going to say add collision with the bullet. I'm going to say if the player is alive, because when we're dead, colliding with the bullet isn't really going to do anything. And other, now other in this collision represents the object that's colliding with the plane, so that being the bullet in this case. If the other owner is not equal to type. So in this case, what we're going to do is HP, we're going to decrease by 5 hit points. We're going to play a sound. Let's do audio, play sound. And it can be any one of the sound effects that we've got. There's with these ones. Remember, they're quite neat. We need to get back to us. So SND Zing 1, SND Zing 2, SND Zing 3. All the way up to number 5. So it'll choose a random one. I'm not randomizing any seeds here, so it doesn't really matter, because if the bullets are going to be hitting us, there's going to be enough of them for it to really be different, I suppose. So let's not worry about that right now. Priority is going to be 100. We don't exactly have a lot of sounds going on, and it does not loop. Right, so that takes care of one bullet hitting us. Well, what happens if too many hit us? What happens if this bullet that's hit us has now taken our health down less than 0? So in effect, it means we are destroyed, should crash. Let's set alive to false. Remember that death direction story we were talking about? Well, here it is. Let's choose between a positive 0.5 and a negative 0.5. And now, if you wanted to, actually let's make it a 1. If we wanted to kind of spiral a little bit more violently, we just increase this amount. So 5 or 10 or 25. Note that the higher this is, obviously the more violent it's going to be. So, change it with caution. I'm going to set the layer equal to layer get ID. This is going to be the death layer. And also we need to make sure that we destroy the bullet once it's collided with us. Just like that. So as long as the child of this object plane is alive, so whether it's the enemy or the player, and they haven't created the bullet, so that's where we're testing the owner over here, then we're going to decrease our health, play a nice zing sound, so it's ripping through our plane, and detect if this is the one that kills us. If it is, well, you know, we do that. And always destroy the bullet. If this fails, the bullet's not going to get destroyed, it's just going to keep flying. But if we go into object bullet, we'll note that it actually destroys itself if it goes further than 1000 pixels or if it goes outside the room. So we don't have to worry about cleaning that up. I think we're actually missing, no, we're not missing that, so what's this saying? This thing hasn't updated, it's a little annoying, but we definitely have that extra argument set. So don't worry about that too much. Let's fire this up and see what happens. I think I've covered everything. This might be a little difficult because we've got a lot of enemy planes. Okay, so we're shooting just fine, we've got health. Oh, okay, so what do we got here? Enemy type isn't set. We've also got this. I thought I removed that in our last video. Let's just double check. An enemy draw event. Yeah, I didn't want that, so let's delete that event. And it said it wasn't set. Okay, type enemy player. Oh, I was supposed to call it type. My bad. Let's make sure this guy's also set correctly. Type. Okay. That's when we did it after that. I think I just subconsciously typed the wrong thing. Let's try this again. Okay, so there's an enemy with a health bar. Oh, they're shooting at me as per normal. Oh, it's making the sounds. Let's see if our health goes. It's going to orange. It's saying danger. We're about to get destroyed. So the best way we can actually take these guys out, because I think they're going the same speed as us, is to get them to collide, to get them to disengage, then loop back around and get a few pot shots at them. If we get right behind them, the computer will have a hard time trying to orientate them to come for us, which means we'll be able to... There we go, we shot one down, and he's in a death layer, so if we go over him, you'll see that it won't show him as above us. Oh, where'd everyone else go? Ah, yeah, they come. They're coming back. So let's get them to shoot us down. You'll see that we will then get smaller and smaller. Eventually, slowly but surely, we will respawn somewhere else. There we go. As if nothing happened. So that about wraps up this video. I hope you found this tutorial educational and helpful. Please feel free to comment, rate, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can get the next part as soon as it comes out. What do you guys want to see next? I'm thinking maybe a plane select or some way we can randomize or enable the user to select some of the properties of these planes. Because as we can see, with so many enemies chasing, it's very difficult to get behind them to actually get any sort of advantage. So at this point, the game isn't really fun. If you like videos like this and want to see more, please check out my Patreon campaign. You can get videos like this a couple days sooner than everyone else. You can also check out some premium content. The project files for this video will be found in the description as always. So until next time, happy coding, and I'll see you then.